Good morning. For today, I think I'm gonna move for the next couple of days. I'm going to move towards just talking more about the current book that I'm currently reading, Mastery by Robert Greene. Uh, and part of the reason why is that I don't really just want to dedicate every video every day just talking about myself, but also would like to talk about other people that are like, for example, in this case, just like writing this book right here, just like pretty much be inspired and maybe inspire you as well through the wisdom of the ancients. Like, this guy is not that ancient; he's still alive this day. But I've been inspired by the words of people who acquired wisdom and they were generous enough to share it with us through their books. I mean, the book cost me like $15. It's nothing compared to the wealth of knowledge that I'm actually acquiring from it. I truly appreciate it. So yeah, I'm just gonna start from the very beginning. I'm just gonna keep on going with pretty much like each video is gonna be a review of the stuff that I have read the previous night or previous day actually, and trying to keep like some notes on the side just to have a quick reference. So I'm in the second chapter right now, and the second chapter is about apprentice, and that's what apprenticeship, and that's why I really want to talk about this topic, because it kind of reflects where I'm at in my career, in my life. But I think a lot of people, they hit this phase multiple times in their lives, especially in current day and age. Excuse me. In the current day and age, we see a lot of workers who keep retraining themselves and changing career paths towards their life, towards during their professional life, just because of the nature of the economy. It's ever changing. People like start off like with their one career, and on average, I believe during the professional life of the average worker here in the United States, the average worker goes through 10 or 5 different careers. I don't remember the exact number. I need to look it up again. But some study was made and some census was made, and on average, I think it's 5 different jobs with different careers an average American worker goes through in their professional life. But anyway, so Robert Greene, in his book Mastery, the way how he looks at mastery is that it follows a 3-step pattern. I mean, we're talking about apprenticeship, not mastery. Apprenticeship goes through a 3-step pattern. I mean, it's pretty obvious what the apprenticeship phase is all about. The apprenticeship phase is about learning and acquiring that skill, that investment into that skill capital into yourself. So the three-step pattern that he observed, or he expressed in his book, they call them the following. So the first phase, or the first step, is like a deep observation, and he qualifies it as a passive mode. The second step is acquiring the skills, or the skill acquisition step. The third step is the experimentation. So this might seem like they're like obvious, like duh, like yeah, we all know that, but bear with me over here. There are like some interesting points that he throws inside this chapter. That's why I really want to share with everyone. So starting with the deep observation step. The deep observation step, he qualifies it as a passive step, or the passive phase, or like a passive mode instead. In that the individual during this phase or during this step, he's not active in trying to change environment where he introduced himself into. So the basic idea during this step is that you need to let yourself be molded by the new work environment. And the reason for that is that you need to observe and learn what's a few information that you need to acquire from that work environment. And the first of all is the culture. And the second of all, what does it take to be good and in that work environment, and how can you achieve mastery of the skills that you will acquire through that work environment. So, like one of the things that he described over there as a strategy to learn what works and what doesn't work is by looking at who gets promoted, for example, like who gets promoted, who gets pointed at as the model, the role model of that job within that work environment, and also try to find out like who gets kind of fired, if you like to express it that way. I don't like that word, but like who gets fired, who gets kind of ignored, who's labeled as a low performance worker in that work environment. So just by observing that, you can kind of point towards a direction that you'll be able to follow when it comes to acquiring the skills and the mastery needed through that work environment itself. And one important thing, and that's a bit reminiscent of his other book, The 48 Laws of Power, and he says you need to observe the power relationship among the team players within that work environment, because his idea is that by knowing like what's the power relationship and understanding the game, by understanding the game of power or the power relationship, you'll be able to lead yourself to having more control or greater control in that work environment. And that control will eventually, I mean, this is not in his book, but in my opinion, that control will eventually help you to have greater job satisfaction in the future. And I think that's like one thing I read lately, is that millennials, my generation, guys, millennials, they have one of the lowest job satisfaction across the board, across all the past generations and future even Generation Z. I don't know if Generation Z is entered the workforce yet or not, but across all the past generations, the millennials have the lowest job satisfaction. And one of the main reasons for that is the lack of control in your workspace. So by understanding the power relationships, you'll be able to lead yourself to acquire more control just by absorbing all those hints. I just want to quote a few like a part of the book in here, in page 37 or 57, rather say, because a lot of people, when they talk about power relationships, it's like politics, and like even myself, when I look at that topic, I feel dirty. It's not a really sexy thing to talk about, but nonetheless, it is something very important to be very aware of. And I quote, these procedural and political rules may be dysfunctional and counterproductive, but your job is not to moralize about this or complain, but merely to understand them, to get a complete lay of the land. So again, this comes back to the concept of being aware of your environment, increase your situational awareness. That's a skill in its own. And I think just through this phase or through this step during your apprenticeship, you'll be able to acquire the skill and make it sharper as well. Okay, moving on to the second step in the apprenticeship phase, and it is described as the skill acquisition step. It is described as being in a practice mode. So in this step, you just like do again and again and again and again, and a relentless repetition of the job, of the work that you're doing at your job, and acquire that skill during the process. So the one thing that he mentioned in the book is that, like, as human beings, we've evolved to have this skill to be able to mirror the skill of other people, acquire a new skill by mirroring other people doing or executing that skill itself. So by learning from other people who are better at you, who've been doing that job longer than you did, you'll be able to acquire that skill. But during that repetition, it should not be a mindless repetition. You have to be very, very, very mindful of it. Like for every single action that you do, know why, how, where, and when, and what you are doing. Like there, be focus, like focus on the execution part. And one story that he shared is that like about the origin of the apprenticeship in the Middle Ages. So during the Middle Ages, like when the creation of new arts and the building of new cathedrals, there's like, I mean, you can go to Europe these days, you can see like the cathedrals, they're freaking amazing. And all those cathedrals, like they had like no schemas. Like the way how they were executed is that like you had like someone who is a really good mason, and then he let people like come into his job, his business as apprenticeships through this apprenticeship model to acquire the skills that his family had acquired for generations. I don't know if I'm expressing this correctly, but what I'm meaning to say is that during the apprenticeship phase in the Middle Ages, the resources were very scarce. And the only way for the learner or the individual, the worker who's into this apprenticeship system within the business, they had to be productive in that business itself. And by being productive, being like using the resources that were used for the actual products, they had to be very mindful of what they were doing. They had to try to waste as little of the resources used during their production process. So that's why that's helped the rise of the apprenticeship system during the Middle Ages, and to be still alive in certain jobs to this day, because with the lack of the resources, you have to be very focused on what you do, so you don't waste any resources. And also, he mentioned also the importance of specializing in the skill. So don't let yourself have like this ADHD kind of syndrome. You get bored with one thing, and then you move on to another thing, you move on to another thing, you move on to another thing. Like focus into one skill, one domain, and be really good at it. So pretty much the old sayings of be good at something. It's better to be good at something than average at everything. And that's how you acquire like a better reputation, because you're really good at a certain skill that other people, a certain skill that's really hard to acquire, and other people really like to have themselves. So they pay you money to execute that skill. Also, as I mentioned earlier, this step right here requires you to repeat the process, like repeat your job or the execution of that skill like again and again and again, so that you be really good at it. And it's a very tedious process. You have to be ready for it mentally and physically. So then, I think like this video is getting way too long. Thank you if you are watching it this far. But anyway, the last step of the apprenticeship phase is experimentation. By experimentation, we mean that the apprentice will be able to start developing his own style or his own thoughts about the process or how to execute his job. He'll be able to start producing new products that might not necessarily emulate the product that he was producing during his apprenticeship, or like the product that was produced or as taught by his master or by his mentor. And before he started talking about this step, he mentioned, or during his discussion about this step, he mentioned like one important thing is that you need to try and attempt to get into this step as soon as possible, because a lot of times a trap that a lot of people fall into is that you get comfortable like through the first step and the second step, you get to learn the system, you get to learn the roles, the power dynamics, you get to learn the rules in your workplace, etc., etc., etc. And you become very comfortable in that environment. So you don't let yourself see what's beyond the horizon. You don't start exploring what's beyond the horizon because you are very comfortable where you are, and you think that's okay for you. I'm in a good place. Like a lot of people, you see I call it middle management syndrome. You get really good at what you do, and then you become like a manager, like somewhere in the seniority level. It's like right in the middle, and that's a comfort zone. That's like a dangerous comfort zone right there. It's like you can tell other people what to do, like how to execute their job, but then again, you don't really want to go beyond that level because that's more discomfort. But it's not just like middle management issue. Like I've seen it like in different facets in life, whether it's in the corporate environment or non-corporate environment. A lot of people just get comfortable and they think I can maintain this level right here. The water level is over here. I'm over here, so I'm good. But then the day or tomorrow, the water is over here or comes over here. And you see the problems going on over there. You have to be very conscious of it. If you feel that that you're in the comfort zone and there's like this block in your head and you feel that you can't move forward anymore, you need to ask some questions. I don't like to use the word you need to panic, but you need to like realize there's something wrong. If there is something wrong, again, I mean, don't say that there is something wrong going on and there is nothing wrong. But anyway, so in this step right here, the most important thing is you need to start creating your own identity, create your own way of doing things, pretty much, like by leveraging the skills that you've acquired through your apprenticeship. And that's what marks the end of the apprenticeship, because pretty much the way how we describe is the phase or this step right here. That's when you know that there's nothing more that you can learn from your current environment, and you need to move to a new environment that will allow you to acquire more skills and allow you to grow even more as a worker in that career path or in that skill area. And that's what makes it a pretty interesting phase, because it's a recurring phase as well. That's like something that's going to keep on recurring. As like you get comfortable in one domain, you will need to start jumping into a new domain again and try to learn it. And through this phase, pretty much you become, I would not call it as a master, but you become comfortable with the skills right here, and then you go out and you start again with step one of your mastery journey of the first phase, or it's being like an apprenticeship again. So it's this whole adage about like you need to keep on learning your whole life. Your whole life is all about learning. It's about like keep on shaping and reshaping your identity to become this master. And even masters, the people that we call masters, they don't consider themselves as masters. They see themselves as a lifelong learner. They see themselves as always being in this apprenticeship phase. I think this phase is the hardest and the most critical phase in our journey to mastery of any skill. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Again, I think I'm going to keep on going with this book for the near future at least, and see how it goes. And as always, have a good day.